Are you ready for the 2020s? 100 years ago, they turned out to be the roaring 20s. One of my concerns is that if these turn out to be the roaring 20s, it's going to be the wrong kind of roar. I'd settle for the boring 20s. Wouldn't that be nice? Somehow, most of the conflicts that ailed humanity just kind of faded away without any dramatic solutions. We don't understand. Historians will puzzle over this for decades. We went back to a kind of Eisenhower complacency that was somehow all-inclusive of people despite their gender, their sexual orientations, their race. It was the most puzzling thing. I'd take a decade like that. And yet, for now at least, as we usher in our new year, it seems that there's all sorts of escalation in the divisions that were already way too much for me. And so, as was pointed out, the more you watch the news, the more seriously torn apart we seem to be. If you watch only one station, there's no problem knowing what's the truth, but if you watch more than one, it becomes especially complex. So what occurred to me is that in this environment, it's really toxic. This is a cultural environment that's hard to breathe healthily in, isn't it? To let your mind, your imagination, your heart just kind of openly flow through your life doesn't quite go with what you see in the papers and on TV and all the other different ways in which those things impact our lives. And in our individual lives, we all have smaller instances of that, of division and discord. That's the case with anyone's life in any culture, in any age. And yet, it seems to me that perhaps the most characteristic feature of the culture of our age, and our time, and our place, is exactly that kind of embittered divisiveness. So I thought, as I was reflecting on what to do for a sermon today, I was wondering, if I live in a toxic land, must I swallow the poison? Do I have some kind of obligation, some kind of witness to be poisoned by the truth of the land that I'm in? And so that's partly what I'm going to be reflecting on. But as soon as I thought of that, I recalled a quotation that I saw when I worked in a drug and alcohol rehab place. And in someone's window, they'd put up the quotation. I assume it's a quotation. Maybe they made it up. Resentment is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to get sick. We'll talk a little this morning about what resentment is, what the elements of that are, and I hope something we might be able to do about it. But the point is this: if you think about the feeling of resentment, that bitterness that chokes in your throat, that sense that's almost indistinguishable from a kind of hatred in the way that it feels, looking at it from the blue marble perspective of that, looking down from thousands of miles in space on our Earth, doesn't it seem like that must be something wrong with that? Doesn't it just seem like that cannot be the way to be an effective witness in our world? So what I want to do this morning is to talk about a way to not swallow that poison. And I'm going to begin by confessing that there are things that make me sick, and in particular, there's one bête noire, if you will. There's one bane of my existence. And so rather than identify that person, which would not be fair to them, because it's just my point of view, I'll just say that this is an important person who's always in the news. It might be that it's the leader of a powerful nation, or it might be the mayor of a Midwestern college town, or the leader of a divided chamber of government, or maybe a princess. But whoever it is, it's like hard for me to get past that. Can any of you all relate to that? Is there anybody that bothers you in that big kind of way and just gets under your craw, as they say? It seems to me that I can't just ignore that. I can't just say, let that person be that person. That there's being an ostrich about it, not being aware of the news or what's going on in the world at all just seems to me an unacceptable alternative. But imagine if I get so caught up in that, saying I can't be an ostrich. Imagine when I'm in that resentment mode, you come up to me and I say, not now, I'm busy hating. I can't be interrupted right now, I'm busy hating someone. The world is a better place because I can't stand this person and I'm consumed by that. So don't interrupt me right now, I'm doing something important. Seems kind of funny when you put it that way. How's that working for you, Mark? You know? It just seems to me, maybe you're one of the Palatkans for Sharia law. Maybe you're with the Make America Levitican again, or some other group that believes in really strong, moral, judgmental, condemnatory philosophies. But for the rest of us, it seems hardly a way to live. So I want you to imagine two people walking along, having a pleasant conversation, talking about poetry, philosophy, Unitarian Universalism. And there's a beer can in the middle of the street as they're walking along. So one person just picks up the beer can, says, I'll carry it along till we get to a recycle bin, or I'll just take it and put it at home. And the other person, can you believe that someone did that? Can you believe that in this day and age of climate denial and everything else, that there are people who just throw a beer can in the middle of the road? What? People like that? How long could that conversation continue in that mode? Anyone think they may have a record for having been through the wrong half of that conversation for a long period of time? It can go on longer than most people would imagine. So from the point of view of the person who's just, well, you know, that's in the past, we'll do what we can, we'll move on, we won't get hung up on it. It's kind of a tough place to be. It's different in perspective. And yet, would you say the environment doesn't matter? Would you say that paying attention to how we live and where we live and cleanliness and those kinds of things is unimportant? You could not say that. Certainly it's important. So the person who's upset about it has a reason to be upset. If we break it down, though, we might recognize one of the ways of understanding what's disproportionate there. What are you going to do about the person who threw that can on the road? Are you going to hire somebody to fingerprint the can and then hire a private detective? I mean, what are you going to do about it? In many and perhaps most cases, the difference between a disproportionate response like that and something that lets us go on with our lives is the difference between action and reaction. It's the difference between fluidity and rigidity. It's the difference between moving on and being stuck in what a Buddhist would simply call attachment of a very particular sort, right? So if I'm going to move on from that, there has to be a way for me to transition from reaction to an action of my own. If you look at those television, they're not even debates. I'm not talking about the Democratic Party preliminary debates or whatever you want to call those. I'm talking about the talking heads screaming at each other on the news channels, right? It's not about, I want to do this, generally. It may be phrased that way, but it's almost, they should, right? Our government should, Congress should, the president should, but we aren't those people. We don't have it in our power to do the things that those people could do. And so resentment, in a way, is when we're saying that they're not doing what they should do because we know what they should do, right? Interestingly, if we break that down, if we look at what's involved in that attitude, we might even find that there's an element of that in an entire cultural morality. That's what the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said. He said that the entire Christian morality of a judgmental God and of holding people responsible so that we can punish them. He said that entire morality is based on what he used the French term ressentiment. And then that actually entered into psychology, and others have used it in a similar way. And Nietzsche talked about it this way. He said, when a strong and noble person, a person of virtue and talent and healthy instincts, does what they do in their lives, they're responding from a standpoint of life and strength and health. And if people get hurt by that, well, people get hurt by that. They don't start from going, ooh, what would be bad? Let me look over my shoulder and avoid what's bad. Let me react to some real or imagined slight. They don't react to jealousy or envy or things about other people. But what about the ones who are hurt? What about the weaker people? In Nietzsche's language, he contrasts the noble and the slave. I would very, very much change around those whole categories. But Nietzsche's point is that those who are weak and feel impotent are the ones who call it wrong and bad and elevate the whole judgmental morality that has shaped centuries of our culture. Contrast that with the artist who isn't thinking about what's wrong and what's right. They're just looking for what fulfills the art. Contrast that with the hunter who's just tracking the prey. Contrast that with many other elements of strength, fluidity, and instinct. And what you have is something that's reactive and that knots its face up in order to take vengeance on those who are bad. So Nietzsche says that the morality of strength is a morality of what is good, and what is good is life-affirming, and that a morality that is reactive begins with you're bad, therefore I must be good because I don't do that, right? I'm going to tell Mom. Well, that's kind of a highfalutin philosophical way to get at things. But I don't want to really talk philosophy today, except in a different sense of the word. Alison Grobnik has written a book called The Philosophical Baby, which I haven't read yet. It just came yesterday, but the word of my title was in chapter 1, so I'm going to refer to that. What I want to talk about is how we can try to disassemble the elements of that ressentiment, take apart what contributes to the resentments, the pettiness, the poison sometimes of our own lives. And then to see if there's a different way of looking at it. So, the first thing I note about this, there's value judgment involved, right? If I had no values, if it was all the same to me, what would it matter if there were a beer can in the road? What would it matter if there was a gay person as mayor of South Bend, Indiana? What would it matter if ... What we're choking on begins from something that we see is important and valuable, and that is our values themselves. What we're choking on is partly, I'm not saying it's only this, and I'm not saying we should get rid of this, but what I'm saying is one of the factors in that poison, if you will, one of the receptors in our body that makes that poison able to work, is that we have a sense of a difference between what's right and what's wrong. We have values. And along with that, there's a sort of a developmental, logical, cognitive thing going on that philosophers call counterfactual. What's factual is simply what happens. If you were only looking at the facts, if you were only looking at what's factual, you'd be right there, concrete, in the moment. But as soon as you say, well, what if? Maybe as soon as you make a distinction between what is and what might be, between what was and what might have been, what's happening and what could yet be possible, you're going beyond the concreteness of just the facts as they're given, as they've been, right? That's what philosophers call counter or contrary to fact. Well, if this had happened instead, where would we be today? So along with our values, another thing in our receptivity, in the way we're put together as human beings, that contributes to our receptivity to this poison, is that we have a sense that things don't have to be the way they are, right? So I take those two things, and I've got the most important ingredients of how I could begin then to get hung up on, it should be that instead of this, right? I value the way it could have been, not the way it is. If only that election had turned out differently. But there's a third thing too. And I think these first two things are almost inescapable. I think it's the third one that really chokes us on that poison. The third thing is, we become convinced that what's at stake here is really important. Not just that this is better than this, but this is better than this, and it matters a whole lot. But I'm not going to say that the key word there is importance. I'm going to take a little different word, and I'm going to say that the third component in the poison we feel forced to swallow is seriousness. When was the last time you saw somebody speaking with a great sense of humor and dancing on light feet and talking with poison in their mouth this way? Seriousness, what Nietzsche called the spirit of seriousness, gravity, is what constrains our creativity, our fluidity, our mindfulness. What drags us into the attachment of that is that sense like a nail being driven into theses on a door if you're Lutheran. This is important stuff. Listen to me. It's the seriousness of it that drags us down. Consider all those they shoulds of the talking heads. Think if that's not poison, the mouths seem so screwed up sometimes. So a different way to react would be a way that isn't done in the spirit of seriousness, right? Now, you all know me as the mild-mannered Dr. Yount, sometimes striptease artist, but beyond that, that was a past life. But, you know, I've got some Tony Stark in me, too. And so what I'm going to do today, instead of remaining the mild-mannered Dr. Yount, is I'm actually going to reveal my secret identity. I am the amazing Pop-Pop. My granddaughter thinks I'm amazing. She loves swinging at the park with me. The amazing Pop-Pop would like to share with you something that is an antidote to any poison when used properly, and that is the phrase, uh-oh. Alison Grubnick points out that most adults don't think of uh-oh as a word, maybe because they can't decide if it's one or two and it doesn't fit the Scrabble parameters. But she says little babies, little toddlers, let's say, use the word a lot. You're trying to do something and it doesn't turn out the way you want it to do. What do you say? Yeah, uh-oh. Now, I have, for some unknown reason, a great fondness for my granddaughter. She's my first granddaughter. She's my only granddaughter. I only had one daughter, and so, you know, there's a lot of firstness there. But it just feels special to me when I get that aura of my granddaughter. And if I could carry my granddaughter's aura with me all the time, I'd be selective about it. There's certain elements of her behavioral routine I might not bring along. I'm not talking about dirty diapers, but you know, the terrible twos start early sometimes. My granddaughter has the most lovely uh-oh, because there's no alarm in it. I had tried to have a file of this. I emailed it to myself. I've got one of these phones that you can't do anything with unless you keep within the proprietary system that Apple has set up, right? So you probably can't hear this, but I'll do it one time. I'll try to put it up to my microphone. that didn't work. Try again. Uh-oh, that didn't work. Could you hear that? So here she is. I don't know what she's doing. I can't remember. Her father took this, but... So yesterday I'm over visiting with my granddaughter. More. She wants to see that over and over. She goes, uh-oh, over and over again. When I say uh-oh, it's hard not to smile. Now, you may not be able to do that if you don't have a granddaughter who says uh-oh or whatever. You may have to substitute something else. Maybe you remember something from an old sitcom or something where someone went, oh dear. And you have to go, I have to warn you though, there's a temptation to do the cartoon version of uh-oh. And I have to tell you that it's no longer politically correct. I'm not as good at history as some people, and I don't know if it was Astro or Scooby-Doo, but do not say ruh-roh, because that's making fun of dogs with speech impediments. Don't do that. There are other times you don't go uh-oh, like sometimes you want to call 911 first, poison control if it's that kind of poison. But in many cases, just saying uh-oh breaks that engagement, that reactivity. Let me step back. And even if I'm not being mindful in a full-blown Buddhist sense of the word, I'm at least stepping back from that nail of attachment that keeps me caught in the reactivity. I could write the Tao of uh-oh. The sermon today could be Zen in the art of uh-oh. But because we're talking about poison, I want to suggest it as an antidote. So, practice with me now. Tulsi Gabbard has won the Iowa Democratic Caucus. Uh-oh. Through an interesting parliamentary maneuver over rules, the Senate has impeached Hillary Clinton. Russian hackers have changed the scoring mechanisms of Candy Crush and Angry Birds. Surprising nomination for Best Picture this year, Cats. This sermon will run another 20 minutes. No, it won't. In fact, I just wanted to say, uh-oh, may your 2020s not be the wrong kind of roaring. May they not even be the wrong kind of boring. But with the right kind of mindfulness and the right kind of uh-oh, may your 2020s actually, like Molly on the Swing, be soaring. Thank you.